Okay, so we're on Samach Gimel Amid Beis. Rav Dimi Minahar Doi, by the two dots toward the top of the Amid, had said that even if you say when Reuven is selling his property to Shimon, even if Reuven says, "I'm selling you umka veruma," meaning to the depths and to the heights, if he wants to sell a bar, he has to say an even more inclusive lashon. He has to say "Kanilach mitahoim ara badroim rakia." That will include even the pit, but otherwise, all it's including is that he can build up as high as he wants, that he's selling him up as high as he wants, and that the seller can't dig. Reuven sold it. Reuven can't dig underneath. Now the Gemara wants to bring a raya to this. So we're 2 lines to the bottom. Toshma. I want to bring a raya to this sheet of Rav Dimi. We said in the Mishnah that someone who sells, let's say Reuven sells his house to Shimon, when he sells the house, it doesn't include the use of the rooftop if it has a fence around it that's 10 amas high. If we say that you always, by default, when someone sells a house, when Reuven sells the house, he automatically sells to Shimon both on top and on bottom. What do we have to tell you? What does it make a difference that the seller Reuven had a mica around the roof that's 10 tvachim high, but we say that he always sells the roima. He sells as high as it goes up on top. So that should include the roof. What does it help that there's a mica? It's a little bit strange because I mean I think the teretz is almost self-explanatory. So Gemara, even though no, the answer is it's true that normally, maybe this is not a riot. It's true that normally when someone sells, when a seller sells a property, he includes with it everything that's above. But a davar chashuv, something that has its own identity, maybe it doesn't. Just like we say a pit, even when you say Umka Varuma, even if you actually say Umka Varuma, pit is not included. So it'd say, even if Umka Varuma is implied, the area, the use of the rooftop where there's a mica makes it into a distinct area that's distinct from the house, and therefore it wouldn't be included. Again, I'd like to reiterate that you have to think about it like these attached houses, these apartments that people sell, like in the old city in Jerusalem, where there's a lot of different cubbies and warrens and things, and you only buy what you buy. If you're selling a house, you're only getting the house. You're not necessarily getting the use of the rooftop on top. That could be considered different. Amalei Ravina Lervashi Tashma. I'm going to go right. The Amar Ishlash. Zoysemers. Hamaycha Beis Chaver B'Amalei Amanash Yutel Yoyne Shali. The Yutel Yoyne Shaloi. If someone sells his house to his friend, Reuven sells his house to Shimon, and he says on selling it on the condition that I'm keeping the rooftop with the fence on it, right? Rashi says, the Rashbam says, talking about where he says, I want to keep for myself the rooftop. And we just quoted the Mishnah that says that the rooftop, if there's a mic around it, always belongs to the seller. So, I mean, I'm sorry.
If it's
well, this is the thing we just said.
If there's a rooftop with the mica, it's higher than
then it belongs to the seller. The seller retains it. As we're saying, it's
the seller, right?
The seller sells it. So the Gemara is saying, what does he have to say? So the Gemara is asking, why do you have to tell me? What is he telling him? Amanasha Duta Helyana Shalei would have been his anyway. Duta Helyana means the same thing as a rooftop that's Gavaya with a mica that's Gavaya Asar. And we brought two shitas. Zid said the nafkamin is that if he wants to put on it, if he wants to make beams sticking out, like we said before, where he sold both the house and the chutzner. So now he no longer owns the chutzner, but he still owns this rooftop. But he has the right to have his beams stick into the nearby chutzner that he sold. That's what he means when he says that Yutel Yoin. Rapapa Amashim Ratza Libnis Aliyah Al Gaba Baina. Rapapa says that the seller is saying that not only am I keeping this rooftop, but I could even build another story on top of the house. If we're saying that the reason why he keeps the rooftop is because we say it's always implied umkavaruma, not like divdimi, but that it's always implied umkavaruma that I get to keep. I'm sorry, right?
Like
you hold it a stumma loikani. If you hold that there's no umkavarima, that you don't, like Rav Dimi says, that you don't get what's on top. Lamali almanas, that if he didn't sell umkavarima minastam, so of course he's allowed to build on top. He never gave that away. So Gemara, Hamali Amanasti, Nafal Hader. So the answer, like we had explained all the way back when we had this Machlekes of Dimi and Reb Zvid, that when even though Rav Papa says that it means that it means not that he could build a brand new aliyah. What he means to say is that if this roof falls down, he could rebuild it. It doesn't mean that he's entitled to that area. What it means is a right to rebuild, which has nothing to do with Aim Kavaraima. He owns the rooftop anyway. What it's saying is that Yutel Yaina says that he can even keep it, he can rebuild it if it falls down. It's not just as long as it's standing. Zok the Mishnah. This is the first part of the Mishnah we've seen a number of times. This is really what we've been talking about for the last few blocks. If a person sells a house, it doesn't include the bar, the pit, or the dus, the cistern. These are different things that hold water. Even though he wrote that I'm selling you all the way down and all the way up. Now this is the part that we're going to be talking about. He has to purchase after he sold this house, and Reuven sold the house, and Reuven retains this pit underneath. Rabbi Kiva says Reuven, upon selling the house, is now going to have to go back to his purchaser, to Shimon, and say, I would like to buy a right to get to this pit that I retained in my house. The Chum say he doesn't have to buy a house, doesn't have to buy the derech. Now, I'm going to say this, even though the Gemara is going to modify it shortly. But the explanation of Rabbi Kiva is, Rabbi Kiva says, someone who sells something is some version of ba'ayin yafu. When he sells something, he means he's selling everything. So therefore, even though he has this pit, and it seems strange, what's the use of having a pit that you can't get to? But that's Rabbi Kiva's understanding, that when you sell something, you mean to sell it fully, and that includes even the rights to get to the pit, and therefore you got to go purchase it back. Some say no, he retained for himself. The person is not sold so fully, and he retains for himself the path, which is sensible in order to be able to get to this pit. If when he sold the house, he specifically mentioned that I'm keeping my pit, even though he would have been able to keep the pit minastam. But if he says I'm keeping the pit, that means to say I'm keeping the pit together with a path. So in that case, he doesn't have to go purchase it. He doesn't have to go purchase the path. Then the Mishnah says the opposite case. Machron la'acher. If someone, rather than selling his house, specifically sold his bar, his cistern, in his property. The purchaser, when he buys it, does not have to buy a path. So this is the opposite. The first case Rabbi Kiva said because he says when someone sells something, he sells everything, and then he has to go purchase back the path. But in this case, where he sold the bar, he also sells everything, and the bar is useless without a way to get to it. So it means he sold the path together with it. Chum say, no, he does have to purchase the path because a person doesn't sell things with such a full heart. Now, this is normally, and the Gemara is going to come to the conclusion that this is Rabbi Kiva holds Hamoicher Ba'ayin Yafa Moicher, and that's why when he sells a house, includes he's also selling the path, and that's why he has to purchase it back. When he sells a bar, he sells the bar with the path. And the Chachamim disagree. They say Moicher Ba'ayin Roya Moicher. But the Gemara is going to suggest that it could be a more limited din than that, which is why I avoided using that way of describing the machlekes. Yasser Ravina Kakashle, Hainu Bar Hainu Das. First, before we get into the sugya, the Gemara asks on the Mishnah, why are we saying two separate things, a bar and a dus? They're two different versions of something that holds water. Amalei Rava Tusvar Ravina Toshma Detanya Echad Abar ve'Echad Adus bekarka. Both a bar and a dus are in the ground. A bar is just a dug out dirt, and the dus is built with bricks. So the Rashbam explains that's why the Mishnah had to say both. One might say that a dus, which is bebinyan, maybe is part of the house because it's part of the structure of the house. It's built, the house is built with bricks, and this is part of bricks, so it makes it part of the house. And you also could say the other way around, that the bar is less chashav, it's not as built, it's not as permanent, so therefore maybe it's sold along with the house. So that's why we had to say both of them. Yasser Rashi Kakashle, Hainu Bar Hainu Dus, he says this is the same thing. The same terms. Again, Rabbi Akiva said, if someone sold a house and he retained his bar, the seller who retained his bar has to go back and buy a path to get to his bar. It sounds on the surface that this is very clearly what the machlokes of the Mishnah is. The reason why it seems so clear to us is because we've come across this machlokes of hamoicha ba'ayin yafa moicha and the Rabbanan hold ba'ayin ra. As we're going to see, but this is not the actual source of it because we have a different way of understanding this Mishnah. And this is from where we get that we find all throughout Shas that we say Rabbi Kiva holds ma'ayin yafa moicha, and that would explain why in the Reish of our Mishnah we say someone who sold a property and retained the bar has to buy a path, and someone who sold a pit, the purchaser gets the path because it's all ba'ayin yafa moicha. So I'm going to know mimai Dilma bahapligi. The Rabbi Kiva savar ain't adam writes the shitim oisav. Maybe over here, the reason why that we say that he has to purchase the path is this person is buying a house. A person who buys a house is very uncomfortable that he's going to have a house and then it's going to be a Rish Sarabim. Someone else can go walking in the middle at night when he's drinking his cocoa in his pajamas, and this guy comes to get a drink from his cistern. So that's a specific reason why over here, maybe over here it's just a specific reason why we say that the path is not included, and the person then negotiates exactly what he's selling. Maybe he'll tell him, you can only come in between the hours of 2 and 4 in the afternoon. That's what I'm willing to sell to you. But it's not because of Ba'ayin Yafa, but it's that it was automatically sold to the bar. It's because this specific circumstance, no one who buys a house wants to buy a house that has such a large restriction on it that someone else, or such an that he sells it with such a disturbing right being given to someone else. So the upmach, the understanding would be in this case that the buyer only purchased it if it includes all the rights of going through, that no one else can go through. Rabbanan Savri and the other hand, the Rabbanan who disagree say this guy, the seller Ruvain, has a pit, and his pit is useless to him without the right to go in the path. But it has nothing to do with Ba'ayin Yafa, Ba'ayin Ra. There's just specific circumstances that dictate that in this case they're arguing. So let me say, so I'll bring you a raya from the Sefer of our Mishnah. Right? In the Mishnah, in the Sefer of the Mishnah, we had reversed it. That Rebbe Kiva said that someone who sells a pit, he automatically sells with it the right to walk to the pit. Where we said, so that's what the Gemara says. So this seems also to indicate Rabbi Kiva says ba'ayin yafa meicher. So that's why the purchaser gets the pit together with the right to use, and the Rabbanan disagree. So tomorrow, I'm gonna skip that. Dilma. So tomorrow, Dilma b'hai pligi. The Bach reads in the whole raya, but you don't have to. We understand. We explain it. So Gemara Dilla Bahai Pligi. So Gemara says no. Maybe the safe is also a different machlekes. Rabbi Kiva Sava Basa Daita Delikeach Haslina. Rabbi Kiva says that when someone sells something, we go after the thought process of the purchaser. And Rabbanan Sami Basa Daita the Moichasli. That means this is a case that both of them have a taina. The lekeach has a taina that I'm buying a piece of a pit, and this pit is useless to me without the pit, without the path to get to it. So Rabbi Kiva says we have to go in a case like this where you have something that's going to ruin the ability to use it for both of them. The person who's selling the pit has a house, and that's going to make his house unlivable. And the purchaser is buying a pit, and he's not going to be able to get to the pit. So the machlekes between Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanan is whose claim do we look at? Whose claim takes precedence? Rabbi Kiva says it's sort of a version of Ba'ayin Yafa, and it sounds almost like Ba'ayin Yafa or Ba'ayin Ra, but what we're doing is limiting it only to the case of where there's something that's going to ruin the ability to use the house or ruin the ability to use your property. And it means the svar of Hamaycha Ba'ayin Ya, Ra Ya Maycha, or Ba'ayin Yafa Maycha can be used in other circumstances. It can be used, let's say, if someone sells I'm going to give an example. I don't know if that it's true, but it's a sort of example. If someone sells a box of apples, does it include the apple that's sitting next to the box? So it's not ruining or not ruining the sale. But if it's ba'ayin yaf, it includes the apple that's sitting on the side. If it's ba'ayin raw, it doesn't include that. We're saying over here that maybe this din that Rabbi Kiva says that we go basa the buyer, we benefit the buyer, which sounds like ba'ayin yafa meicher. Maybe that's limited only to a case where if it's not ba'ayin yafa, if we don't give that, that will ruin the whole purchase. And over here, this purchaser, this guy who's buying a pit, if he doesn't have a way to get to it, he has no use from the pit. And conversely, the Chum will say, no, over here, the seller, if he sells this pit and he gives away the right to walk to the pit, he's going to lose the use of his house. He's going to have someone walking through his house. So since both of them have if you're going to say that we favor them, either ba'ayin yaf or ba'ayin ra, it's going to significantly affect or totally ruin their ability to enjoy their purchase or what they own. In that case, we say Rabbi Kiva says we go basar the purchaser, and the Chachamim say no, we go basar the seller.
Are we using the same logic that we had in reverse? In other words, that the buyer does not want to have to fly through the air, and that the seller does not want someone walking by while he's.
Yeah, it's the same svarus. That's what makes it that it's unusable. But it just happened. It happens to be over here. But the problem is we're reversing their sheets, right? In the first case, it seems like Rabbi Kiva said that the
We're
Rabbi
using
Kiva
the same we're
that he
following the same logic through,
Rabbi Kiva,
basically.
well, we're
But we
following
are.
the same logic, but in the first case we said Rabbi Kiva said
Yeah.
that the person who kept the bar has to purchase the path. And now he's saying that you get automatically the path with it. But both cases is going to favor the person who's buying. So we're saying that he favors the buyer in the case where there's something where there's a strong taina. So it's the opposite taina that he's favoring. He's going with the taina now of the other way around, that you're ruining the house. Yeah. So maybe I'll bring you a raya that the machlokes between Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim is ba'ai and yafa. We couldn't prove it from our Mishnah. We got rid of the rayas in both ways. So I'll try to bring you a raya from a different source. When someone sells a house, it doesn't include a bar, a pit, and not a wine press. And not a coop. Bein charev and bein yeshuvin. Whether they're out of use, whether they're in use. When a person sells their house, these things are not included. Like we said, it's very similar to the bar, that these are all commercial installations, and they're not part of the house. But Rabbi Kiva says the exact same thing like he said in our Mishnah, that he has to purchase a way to get to them. Why is the Mishnah repeating itself? This is the same thing that we said in our Mishnah. Instead of just saying it by a bar, we included a gas and we included a shayvich. The repetition must be to tell us that it's not specifically because of the fact that this will ruin, like we try to evade saying that this is the case of ba'ayin yafa, ba'ayin ra. It's repeating it to tell you that this is a general rule that someone who sells something, according to Rabbi Kiva, always does so generously, and the Chama saying not like that. So Dilma bias, the Kamash one Sada. So tomorrow, no, maybe over here, this is not talking about someone who bought a house. This is talking about someone who sold a house. This is talking about someone who sold a field that had a bar, one of these commercial things in it. Utsricha. And we have to say both. The Ashmin and bias mishum the boy's niusa. By a bias, there's more reason to say that a person objects to having a path sold within his property. So that's why Rabbi Kiva says he has to purchase the derech. Maybe Rabbi Kiva would be maida in the case of a sada because it doesn't bother him so much to have a path going through his sada. Mishum the kashile dafsha, because he doesn't want people trampling his produce by going through his field. Avalbayas about houses are made to be walked in. Ela misefa. So the Gemara says, we can't bring a raya from the ratio of that brisa that we just quoted, from where we said that someone who sold a bar or a shayvich or a gas, but from the sefer. What do we have to say this? We already established that there's no difference between a bias and a sada, and this is just repeating the same. We're just reversing the shitas of Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim. We see from here, after all this, after all our trying to evade the inevitable conclusion, Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim do argue about whether Kiva says Ba'ayin Yafa Meicha, and the Chachamim say Ba'ayin Ra Meicha. Okay, we'll stop over here. Shkayach.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Yes.